Hi everyone, and welcome to another Balance Your Productivity live broadcast. I'm back from my break. Was away for a couple of weeks, so didn't run these sessions then. Everyone needs to take a break every now and then. So thank you for watching, and feel free to either catch up on any of the previous sessions, or if you're watching this one live, add a comment or ask a question as we go along or afterwards. Always happy to answer your questions. And this week, and actually over the next couple of weeks probably, I'm going to have a look at overwhelm and feeling overloaded. It's something that is coming up for me. It's quite interesting how conversations go with the people that I either talk to or work with, that there's often a theme that runs through it. And for the last couple of weeks, and this week in particular, it seems to be around overwhelm and feeling overloaded. And I know that's often something that people really struggle with when they're trying to manage their time. So hi to the viewers, people that are watching live. Feel free to make a comment or ask a question as we go along, and I will endeavour to keep one eye on your comments and also what I'm going to be talking about. So as I said, it seems to be a common theme at the moment that more and more people are feeling overwhelmed, they're feeling overloaded with the amount of work that they have to do, and just sort of generally everything that's going on. More and more demands being made on their time, there's more and more work coming in, and this sort of sense that they actually just have to step up and get on with it and get the work done, even though they feel they've already got enough to do. Quite a few of these people are either running their own businesses, so that tends to almost go with the territory, in that you don't have the number of people, especially if it's just you, or the resources to have other people available to do some of the things that need doing. So, or they're working in small organisations or in small teams, so again, there aren't necessarily the resources to go around, or that they feel that they just need to sort of get on with it and get the work done, so they just keep taking on more and more. It's also natural that sometimes we go through cycles of being particularly busy certain times of the year, and more work coming in. So some of this overload might be temporary, but in a lot of situations it just seems to be becoming the norm. And inevitably, when you're feeling overloaded and overwhelmed, it's going to have an impact on your productivity, as well as the way that you're working, your motivation, and how you're feeling generally, which then has a knock-on effect on everything else. So the more busier and more overwhelmed you are, the less productive you're going to be, and that then ends up in that cycle of you feel even more overloaded and overwhelmed. So it's a negative cycle you end up with. If you're feeling particularly stressed out by working long hours, and I was saying about it being a sort of temporary situation, it's people often find, particularly before they go away on holiday, that there's an awful lot to do. And I will admit that just before I went away on my break, it's always a very busy time before you go away, because you want to get everything finished, you want to end up with a clear desk. And also certain times of the year, particularly with some of the financial services people I work with, the end of tax returns, VAT returns, those sorts of financial dates is always going to have an impact because of all the work that's got to be done, and there is a deadline that needs to be met. And that happens with people working on projects. When a project deadline is coming up, it tends to get very busy, and you can feel very overwhelmed because you're trying to deal with that and everything else that's going on. So when this becomes the norm, things like just everyday life, exercise, socializing, spending time with family, friends, just ends up taking a back seat. And you're just trying to deal with what's landing on your desk every day, or what's coming in. So when you're in this situation, and if you're feeling particularly overwhelmed and you just don't know where to start, one of the very first things that I get people to do is you need to get a handle on what the situation actually is, what the reality is, or how big is this problem. And one of the ways of doing that is to grab a piece of paper, and always say piece of paper, I think, is better. There's something about the organic nature of writing things down rather than just tapping it out on a keyboard and a screen. But whatever works for you. I do type much faster than I write, but even so, if I'm writing down a list, it's nice to have that organic process. So find a quiet space if you can. Get away from your day-to-day office environment. Go and tuck yourself in a coffee shop for an hour. And I know you're going to say that you're just too busy to take time out. You're already overwhelmed and overloaded. Why would you want to take time out to do this? But it's really important to give you a sense of perspective on what's really going on and start to get back in control of the situation. And you can't do that if you're just running around effectively like a headless chicken the whole time, just reacting to everything new that's coming in, and you're just on that treadmill and constantly trying to keep going. You need to take a step back, take a deep breath and think, right, what is going on? What is everything that I need to get done? Because the other thing that tends to happen is you've got a lot of this stuff in your head, and getting it out on paper is really going to help you get a better sense of perspective and to be able to deal with it. So write everything down. And I mean everything, all those things that are buzzing around in your head, all those tasks you've got to do, whether it's on multiple to-do lists, post-it notes, little bits of paper all over your desk. Get everything in one place on one piece of paper and write it down. All the work-related things, anything personal, big tasks, little tasks, put it all down on paper. That can be quite scary because you suddenly realise everything there is to do, and it makes it look worse before it gets better when you've written everything down. But at least now it's all in one place and you can start to get a sense of perspective and start to prioritise that. So once you've got everything down, you need to organise all of those tasks. So take a look at the list, go through each of the tasks that you've put down and give it a priority. So which of those things are urgent? What are the things that you need to do sooner rather than later, or ASAP, or even that's the one you need to get done today? Organise them in priorities. And I know I've touched on this sort of idea of planning and prioritising before, but it's really important when you're in this sort of situation of overwhelm that you take that step back and you plan and you prioritise. Because as soon as you start to look at that list and you start to prioritise, you'll get more of a sense of what's achievable and what's not. There will also be some things on that list that you might think, well, actually, that's really not important. What am I worrying about? Or why am I worrying about it now? I can leave that till later. And you get a much better idea of how many important things you need to do, and you can start to prioritise your time accordingly. So think about the time that's required for each of those tasks as well. So this comes back to using your to-do lists in an efficient way, prioritising them, working out how much time you need for each of the tasks that you have on that list, and then getting a sense of when you need to do them. What are the important ones? What are the urgent ones? When are you going to do them? And what resources do you perhaps need in order to get things going? Perhaps you don't have the right information, you don't have people that you need to work with or information that you need. Do you need to break some of those tasks down into smaller, more achievable goals or easier steps? Break them down into simple steps rather than one big project. So I've mentioned before often with to-do lists, people have a project that is on that list rather than breaking it down into the steps, manageable steps that they can take to complete that, and they move on to the next thing. And that can seem more overwhelming when you have a whole project that's there and you think, well, I don't have time to start that. But if you break it down into more achievable steps, then it might be easy to take the first step or the second step or allocate a chunk of time to it. So write it all down and then organise and prioritise that list. You'll then have a much better idea of where that overwhelm is coming from, or you'll start to feel more in control, or that there are some things that you can do. and you'll be working in a much more productive and efficient way rather than a reactive mode or taking a scattergun approach and trying to sort of juggle multiple things and switching from task to task, which isn't a particularly efficient way of working. Have a look at what you can do to reduce that list. Where are some of those tasks coming from? Is there anything there that you really don't need to do? Is there anyone else that you can talk to or that can help out with getting some of those tasks done? And are there some things on there, which quite often there are, that really aren't your area of responsibility, but for various reasons they've ended up on your list or you've been asked to do them? Are you guilty of saying no, saying yes too often, in which case you tend to end up overwhelmed and overloaded with work because more and more just gets piled on you? Have a look at where some of these tasks are coming from and what's causing the stress and the sense of overwhelm with them. Do you simply not have enough hours in the day to get everything done? Do you not have enough resources to get this work done? And if you are guilty of saying yes to some of these things that are on your list that you think, well, perhaps if I hadn't said yes, that you wouldn't be feeling so overwhelmed, then at least make the commitment that while you sort this list out and you start feeling more in control, that you don't say yes to any additional work until you can get a handle on this. Ask for help. Now you've got your list together, you've got a better sense of what the problem is, what your priorities are. You can go and talk to your boss or your manager, the person that you report to, and say, look, this is what I've got, this is how much time I have available, and this is what needs to be done, and these are some of the dates, and these are my deadlines, and essentially you can't fit a quart into a pint pot, so something needs to give. And if you need that support from your manager or your boss or your team, then just having that conversation is also going to help, and they may have a solution. They may be able to help with prioritizing. It may also be a way of asking for additional resource when you can put it in black and white as to what the size of the problem is and what the issues are. And it's not necessarily just that you're perhaps not feeling particularly, you feel you could be working more productively. That's something that people will often think, well, I should be able to do this, or it's my fault that these things aren't getting done, or that I'm feeling overloaded because I'm just not working in an efficient way. But that might not be the case. And when you look at it in black and white, you get a much better sense of what the problem actually is. So talk about it with your boss, maybe talk to a peer, a colleague, another team member, perhaps even somebody that's not involved in the business or the organisation, and get their ideas and a different perspective on how you can tackle that problem, even going through it step by step and looking at each task. And once you've got that list, it can create a much greater sense of relief when you think either things aren't as bad as you thought they were, or you see a plan that you can take to get some of those things done, or you know at least that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And one of the things that people often say is, well, okay, I've got this list and maybe it's got 50 things listed on it, but I know that by the end of the day, I'm going to have more stuff coming in. So you need to plan and prioritize the new stuff that's coming in, and more importantly, potentially say no, as I said, until you've got a handle on what it is that you're doing. One way of tackling it is also to have a focus day, or set aside a few hours when you're going to tackle some of the things that are on this list, so you can really set aside some productive time when you can get through a lot of these things. It might mean working late for a few evenings if you're not doing so already. It might even mean catching up or having a clearing session over the weekend. And this is very much an exception, and it's only a temporary thing until you can actually deal with that workload. If you're already working late, working all the evenings as a matter of course, then something else needs to happen. So that is the first starting point on how to deal and tackle any overwhelm. Is write it all down, organise the list, and then see how you can then fit that into moving forward and tackling some of those things so you can feel more in control. I will take a look next time in the next session with some additional tips on how you can manage your stress and how you feel about things, and actually taking a break from feeling overwhelmed. In the meantime, if you are feeling that you would like to tackle your own issues around overload and overwhelm, then do get in touch. Any additional tips and strategies, there are some in my blog, and check out the time quiz on my website if you want some better if you want to create better time habits, or even as just a starting point to see where you are. Perhaps it's not quite as bad as you think. So until next time, stay productive and balanced, and I'll see you on the next session. Take care.